Chapter 29. That night, I gave Nana Mama a little taste of her own medicine. I waited until late, after the kids had gone to bed. Then I found her in her favorite reading chair, huddled over a copy of Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. "What's this?" She squinted at the manila folder in my hand as if it might bite her. "More news articles. I want you to take a look at them. They tell a horrible story, Nana. Murder, fraud, rape, genocide." The article I'd given Nana included coverage of the gang's D.C. murders. There were 2 long and well-written stories from the Post, one on each family, including pictures from happier times, like when they'd had their heads. "Alex, I've already told you. I know what's going on there. I don't want to discuss this anymore." "Neither do I. You don't have to solve every single case. Let it go for once in your life." I wish I could. I put the folder flat on her lap, kissed the warm top of her head, and went up to bed. "Stubborn," I muttered. "Yes, you are. Very." Chapter 30. In the morning, I went downstairs around 5:30. I was surprised to see that Janny and Ali were already up. Nana stood fiddling around at the stove with her back to me. She was cooking something cinnamony and irresistible. I sensed a trap. Janny ferried glasses of orange juice from the counter to the table, where there were already silverware and cloth napkins for 5. Ali was already sitting at his place, working on a big bowl of cereal and milk. He saluted me with a drippy spoon. "He's here." "Ate too, Ali?" "Well, this is a pleasant surprise," I said, loud enough for the whole room. Nana didn't respond, but she had heard me for sure. Only then did I notice a yellow-bordered National Geographic map of Africa scotch-taped to the refrigerator door. And also, set down with the napkins and silverware on the table, my passport. "So," said Nana, "it was nice knowing you." Chapter 31. A CIA operative named Ian Flaherty was babysitting a hysterical family down in Port Harcourt, Nigeria. The parents' teenaged son and daughter had been kidnapped. They were gathered together in the living room, waiting to learn the ransom demands, and the atmosphere couldn't have been more desperate. Oh no, Flaherty had thought. His cell rang, and everyone crowded into the room, looked at him with anxious faces and deep concern. "I'm sorry I have to take this. It's another case," he said, then walked out into the lush gardens just off the living room. America was calling. Another kind of emergency. Flaherty recognized the voice on the other end as that of Eric Dana, his superior, at least in rank. "We have quite a situation on our hands. A homicide detective named Alex Cross is on his way there. He'll arrive on Lufthansa Flight 564 at 4:30 p.m. "The Tiger's in Lagos?" Dana asked. "He's here," said Flaherty. "You've seen him yourself?" "I have, actually. Do you want me to meet the detective's plane?" "I'll leave that up to you. Probably be best if I meet him. Alex Cross, you say? Let me think about it." "All right, but you have to watch over him. Don't let anything happen to him, when it can be helped. He's well-liked here and connected. We don't want a mess over there." "Too late for that," Flaherty said, and snickered a nasty, cynical laugh. He went back to comfort the family whose children were probably already dead. But they would pay anyway. Chapter 32. Well, the investigation had definitely taken a turn now. But was it for better or for worse? The plane from Washington to Frankfurt, Germany was nearly full, and it was incredibly noisy for the first hour anyway. I spent some idle time guessing who might be continuing on to Africa, but it wasn't too long before I fell back into my own dark reveries. Everything that had led to this trip ran through my head like extended case notes, going all the way back to my Georgetown days with Ellie, and then up to Nana's grudging consent that morning. Nana's going-away gift, such as it was, sat open on my lap. It was a copy of Wole Soyinka's memoir, You Must Set Forth at Dawn. She'd bookmarked it with a family photo. Janny, Damon, and Ali, cheesing with Donald Duck at Disneyland a year or so back, and she had underlined a quotation on the page. Tiagba Bande, Aye Ogunja. As one approaches an elder status, one ceases to indulge in battles. It was her version of getting the last word, I suppose, except that it had the opposite effect on me. I was more determined than ever to make this trip count for something. Whatever the odds against me, I was going to find the killers of Ellie's family. I had to. I was the Dragon Slayer. Chapter 33.
Ah, Soyinka, an illuminating writer. Have you read him before?
I didn't realize that someone had stopped in the aisle alongside my seat. I looked up, though just barely, at the shortest priest I'd ever seen. Not the shortest man, but definitely the shortest priest. His white collar came just to my eye level. No, this is my first, I said. It was a going-away gift from my grandmother. His smile got even brighter, his eyes wider.
Is she a Nigerian?
Just a well-read American.
Ah, well, nobody's perfect.
He laughed, before there could be any suggestion of an insult.
Tagwa banda, ayaungunja. It's a European proverb, you know.
Are you Yoruba? I asked. His accent sounded Nigerian to me, but I didn't have the ear to tell Yoruba from Igbo, from Hausa, or any of the other tongues.
Yoruban Christian.
He winked.
Christian Yoruban, if you ask the bishop. But don't tell on me. Do I have your word on it?
I won't tell anyone. Your secret is safe. He extended a hand as if to shake, and then sandwiched mine between both of his when I reached out toward him. The priest's hands were tiny, yet they communicated friendship, and maybe something else.
Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your savior, Detective Cross?
I pulled my hand back. How do you know my name?
Because if not, considering the trip you're about to take, now might be a good time to do so. Accept Jesus Christ, that is.
The priest made the sign of the cross over me.
I am Father Bambata. May God be with you, Detective Cross. You will need his help in Africa, I promise you. This is a very bad time for us. Maybe even a time of civil war.
He invited me to come sit in the empty seat next to him, and we didn't stop talking for hours. But he never did tell me how he knew my name. Chapter 34. 18 hours, which seemed more like a couple of days, after I left Washington, the flight from Frankfurt finally landed at Murtala Mohammed Airport in Lagos, Nigeria. I had watched the unbelievable and somewhat hypnotic sweep of the Sahara from the plane, the savannas that buffered it from the coast, and the equally vast Gulf of Guinea just beyond the city. Then, as I deplaned onto the tarmac, I suddenly felt like I was in any town, USA. It might have been Fort Lauderdale, for all I could tell.
I'm sorry I can't help you here, brother.
Father Bombata came up and shook my hand again before we separated. He had told me he had an escort meeting him to speed up his arrival.
Put 200 naira in an empty pocket, my friend.
What for? I asked.
Sometimes God is the answer. Other times, it's cash.
Smiling as ever, the diminutive priest gave me his card, then turned and walked away with a final friendly wave. I found out what he meant around 3 hours later, which was the amount of time I had spent sweating on the immigration line. There were just 2 slow-moving officers at the counter for something like 400 people. Some passengers sailed through, while others were detained at the head of the line for as long as 30 minutes. Twice I saw someone taken away by an armed guard through a side door, rather than being allowed to go out to the main terminal. When it was finally my turn, I handed my landing card and passport to the officer. Yes? And your passport? he asked. I was momentarily confused, but then I remembered what Father Bombata had said and understood. I held the scowl in check. The official wanted his bribe. I slid 200 naira across the counter. He took it, stamped me through, and called out for the next person without ever looking at me again. Chapter 35. The low hubbub and frustration of clearing immigration was nothing compared with the instantaneous onslaught of noise and hurrying people that met me when I passed through the hand and fingerprint-smudged glass doors and into the main terminal of Murtala Muhammad. There's where I got my first real indication that I was in a metropolitan area of 13 million people. I think at least half of them were there at the airport that day. So this is Africa, I thought. And somewhere out there is my killer, or rather, killers. No fewer than 5 Nigerian officials stopped me on my way to the luggage carousels. Each of them asked for verification of my identity. They all basically said the same thing. Visa, American Express, any card will do. Each of them clearly knew I was American. They all required a small bribe, or maybe they thought of it as a gratuity. By the time I reached the baggage carousel, got my duffel, and pushed back out through the 20-deep wall of people pressing in, I was tempted to fork over a few more naira to a raggedy-looking kid in an old skycap hat who asked where I wanted my bags taken. I thought better of it, however, and pushed on, hauling my own luggage, keeping everything close to the chest. Stranger in a strange land, I thought, though I was also strangely pleased to be here. This promised to be quite an adventure, didn't it? It was completely new territory for me. I didn't know any of the rules. Chapter 36. There was no relief outside, where the air smelled of diesel, and no wonder. There was a raft of old cars, trucks, and bright yellow buses everywhere that I looked. Locals of all ages walked alongside the traffic, selling everything from newspapers to fruit to children's clothing and used shoes.
Alexander Cross?
I turned around, expecting to see and meet Ian Flaherty, my CIA contact here in Nigeria. The CIA was good at sneaking up on you, right? Instead, I came face to face with 2 armed officers. These were regular police, I noticed, not immigration. They had all black uniforms, including berets with insignia chevrons on the epaulets of their shirts. Both of them carried semi-automatics. I'm Alex Cross, yes, I told them. What happened next defied all logic. My duffel bag was ripped from my arm, then my small suitcase. One of the officers spun me around and I felt cuffs on my wrists, then a hard pinch as they snapped down too tightly. What's going on? I struggled to turn to look at the policeman. What is this? Tell me, what's happening? The officer with my luggage raised a hand in the air as if he were hailing a cab. A white 4-door Toyota truck immediately pulled up to the curb. The cops yanked open a rear door, ducked my head, and pushed me in, throwing my travel bag after me. One officer stayed on the sidewalk, while the other jumped in next to the driver, and we took off. I suddenly realized I was being kidnapped. Chapter 37. This was surreal. It was insane. Where are you taking me? What is this about? I'm an American police officer, I protested from the back of the truck. No one seemed to be listening to a word I said. I leaned forward in my seat and got a baton hard in the chest, then twice across the face. I felt and heard my nose break. Blood immediately gushed down my face onto my shirt. I couldn't believe this was happening. Not any of it. The cop in the front passenger seat looked back at me, wild-eyed and ready to swing the baton again.
You like to keep quiet, white man? Fucking American, fucking terrorist, fucking policeman?
I'd heard that some people here didn't like American blacks referring to themselves as African American. Now I was feeling it firsthand. I breathed hard through my mouth, coughing up blood and trying to focus, though my head was spinning. Humidity and diesel fumes washed over me as the truck weaved through airport traffic, the driver repeatedly sitting on the horn. I saw a blur of cars, white, red, and green, and several more bright yellow buses. Women were walking on the side of the road with swaddled babies held low on their backs, some of them with baskets balanced on top of their geles. There were a great number of huts in view, but also modern buildings, plus more cars, buses, trucks, and animal-driven carts. All around me, business as usual. And business as usual inside this truck, I feared. Suddenly, the cop was on me again. He stretched over the seat and pushed me onto my side. I braced for another strike of his billy club. Instead, I felt his hands patting me down. Then my wallet was sliding out of my pocket. "Hey!" I yelled. He pulled out the wad of cash I had, 300 American and another 500 in Naira, then threw the empty wallet back in my face. It sent a shudder of pain deep into my skull. I coughed out another spray of blood, which hit the seat and earned me another baton strike across the shoulder. The dark blue nylon sheet covering the back seat suddenly made sense to me. It was there for blood stains, wasn't it? I had no bearings, no idea why this was happening, no idea what to do about it either. In spite of my own better judgment, I asked again, "Where are you taking me? I'm an American policeman. I'm here on a murder case." The officer barked out something in dialect to the driver. We swerved, and I fell against the car door as we came to a fast stop on the shoulder of the road. They both got out. One of them tore open the door on my side, and I dropped to the ground, cuffed and unable to break my fall. A world of dust and heat and pain swam around me. I started to cough up dirt. Powerful hands were under my arms now, lifting. The cop, or whoever he was, brought me up to my knees. I saw a little boy staring from the back of a packed Audi station wagon as it passed.
"You are a brave man, just as brave as you are stupid, fucking white man."
It was the driver talking now, stepping in for his turn. He slapped me hard, once across the left side of my face, and then back across the right. I struggled to stay upright. "You two are doing an excellent job." I was definitely punchy. Already I didn't care what came next. It was a hard overhand fist to my temple. I heard a strange crunching sound inside my head, then another. I don't know how many closed fist blows came after that. I think I passed out at 4. Chapter 38. Unreal. Unprecedented. Unbelievable. It was dark when I woke up, and I hurt all over, but especially around my nose. At first, my mind was blank. I had no idea where I was. Not Africa, not anywhere. I just thought, how the hell did I get here? And then, where is here? Where have I been taken? My hand went up to my temple. I felt a sharp sting where I touched an open wound, and then I remembered the handcuffs. But they weren't on my wrists anymore. I was on my back, on a hard floor, stone or cement maybe. Someone was looking down at me. I couldn't make out his expression in the nearly lightless room. I could only tell that he was a dark-skinned man. Not one man, I realized. Many. A dozen or more men were standing around me. Then I got it. They were prisoners, like me.
"White man is awake,"
someone said. My clothes gave me away, I supposed. They had made me for an American. White man was meant to be an insult, one that I had heard already on the trip. "Where am I?" It came out as a croak. "Water?" I asked. The one who'd already spoken said,
"Not until morning, my friend."
He knelt down and helped me sit up, though. My rib cage felt like it was ready to explode, and I had a monster headache that wasn't going away by itself. I saw that I was in a bleak, filthy holding cell of some kind. Even with my nose broken, the smell was unbelievably strong and foul, probably coming from a latrine in some unseen corner. I took shallow breaths through my mouth. light there was came through a grated door on the far wall. The place looked big enough for maybe a dozen of us, but there were at least 3 times that number, all males. Many of the prisoners were lying shoulder to shoulder on the floor. A relatively lucky few were snoring away on wall-mounted bunks. "What time is it?" I asked.
Midnight, maybe? Who knows? What's the difference to us? We're all dead men anyway.
Chapter 39. As my head cleared some, I realized that my wallet was gone, and my belt. And I realized as I felt around some more, the earring from my left ear. The lobe was scabbed over where a small silver hoop had been, a birthday present from Janny. Where had they taken me? How far was I from the airport? Was I still in Nigeria? Why hadn't anyone tried to stop them from kidnapping me? Did it happen all the time? I had no idea about any of these questions, or their answers. "Are we in Lagos?" I finally asked.
Yes, in Kirikiri. We are political prisoners, so I have been told. I am a journalist. And you are?
A metal scrape came from the direction of the door as it was unlocked, then opened wide. I saw 2 blue-uniformed guards pause in the light of a cement corridor before they stepped in and became shadows themselves. Seconds later, one of them played a flashlight over us. It caught me in the eyes and hung there for several seconds. I felt sure they were here for me, but they grabbed the man 2 down from me instead, the one who had said he was a journalist. They pulled him roughly to his feet. Then one of the guards unholstered a pistol and pressed it to his temple.
"No one talks to the American. No one,"
the guard told the room.
"You hear me?"
Then, as I watched in disbelief, the man was pistol-whipped until he was unconscious. Then he was dragged out of the holding cell. The reaction of the other prisoners around me was mostly silent acceptance, but a couple of men moaned into their hands. No one moved. I could still hear snoring from a few of them. I stayed where I was, holding it all in until the vicious guards were gone. Then I did the only thing I could, which was ease back down to the floor, where every shallow, rapid breath produced another slice of pain through my chest. What kind of hell had I gotten myself into? Chapter 40. I wish I could say that my first night in the prison cell in Kirikiri was a blur, and that I barely remember it. It's just the opposite, though. I will never forget any of it, not 1 second. The thirst was the worst. On that first night, anyway. My throat felt like it was closing up. Dehydration ate at me from the inside. Meanwhile, oversized mosquitoes and rats tried to do the same from the outside. My head and torso throbbed like a metronome all night, and a sense of hopelessness threatened to overwhelm me the minute I let my guard down, or, God forbid, slept for half an hour. I'd read enough from Human Rights Watch to know something about the conditions in this kind of prison, but the gap between knowing it and living it was enormous. It was possibly the worst night of my life, and I'd had some bad ones before this. I had spent time with Kyle Craig, Gary Sinigi, and Casanova. As dawn finally came, I watched the single-barred window like a television set. Seeing its slow change from black to gray to blue was as close as I could get to optimism. Just when the prisoners around me began to stir, the cell door opened again. A wiry guard stood at the threshold. He reminded me of a very tall grasshopper.
"Cross! Alexander! Cross! Over here! No!"
It was a struggle to look halfway able-bodied as I slowly rose to my feet. I focused on the pain of my chest hairs being pulled out when they had fused with the dried blood in my shirt. It was just instinct, but it got me up on rubbery legs and across the floor. Then I followed the guard into the corridor. He turned right, and when I saw the dead end ahead of us, I let go of any thoughts I'd had about getting out of the prison. Maybe ever. policeman," I said, starting up my story again. "I'm here investigating a murder." And then it struck me. Was that why I was in this prison? Chapter 41. This definitely was hell. We passed several foreboding metal doors like the one to my cell. I wondered how many prisoners were kept here, and how many of them were Americans. Most of the guards spoke some English, which made me suspect that I wasn't the only American here. The last door on the ward was the only one without a lock. An old office chair sat in front of it, its seat nearly rusted through.
"Inside,"
barked the guard.
"Quickly now, go ahead, detective."
When I went to move the chair out of the way, he shoved it into my hands. Just as well. It was something to sit on besides the floor, and I didn't feel much like standing right now. Once I was in, he closed the door and from the sound of it, walked away. This room was similar to the holding cell, except that it was maybe half the size and empty. The cement floor and stone walls were streaked dark, which was probably where the putrefying smell came from. There was no latrine here, possibly because the whole area had been a latrine at one time. I looked back at the gray metal door again. Given that there was no lock, was it more foolish to try to get out of here than to just sit and wait for whatever might come next? Probably not, but I couldn't be sure about it, could I? I was halfway to my feet when I heard footsteps again. I sat back down. The door opened and 2 police officers came in, wearing black uniforms instead of prison guard blue. My stomach told me it was a bad trade-off. So did the hard, pissed-off look on the guards' faces.
"Cross? Alexander?"
"Could I have some water?" I asked. There was nothing on earth that I wanted more. I could barely speak now. One officer in mirror shades glanced over at the other, who shook his head no. "What am I charged with?" I asked.
"Stupid question,"
said Mirror Shades. To demonstrate, the second cop walked up and drove his fist into my stomach. My wind was gone even before I hit the floor like a dry sack.
"Get him up."
Mirror Shades hoisted me easily, then put his powerful arms around my shoulders from behind. When the next punch came, he kept me from falling over, and also made sure my body absorbed the full impact. I vomited immediately, a little surprised there was anything to bring up. "I have money," I said, trying what had worked before in this country, back at immigration. The lead cop was huge, as tall as Samson, with a flopping Idi Amin belly. He looked down the slope of his body right into my eyes.
"Let's see what you have."
"Not here," I said. Flaherty, my CIA contact, had supposedly set up a money fund for me in a Lagos bank, which at this point was the equivalent of 1,000,000 miles away. "But I can get it." The lead cop crushed his elbow into my jaw. Then came another wrecking ball of a punch to my chest. Suddenly I couldn't breathe. He stepped back and waved Mirror Shades out of the way. With an agility I wouldn't have guessed at, the large fat man kicked high with one boot and caught me square in the chest again. All the air remaining went out of me. I felt as if I'd just been crushed. I heard, rather than saw, the 2 guards leave the room. That was it. They left me lying on the floor. No interrogation, no demands, no explanations. No hope. Chapter 42. Back in the holding cell, I was given a bowl of cassava and a cup of water. Only a few ounces, though. I bolted the water but found I couldn't eat the cassava, which is an important vegetable throughout Africa. My throat closed when I tried to swallow solid food. A young prisoner hovered nearby and was staring at me. With my back to the wall, I whispered barely loud enough for him to hear. "You want it?" I held out the bowl.
"We hear the cassava, the great cassava,"
he wheezed as he took the bowl.
It's from a famous poem we learn in school.
He scrabbled over and sat next to me, both of us watching the door for guards. What's your name?
Sunday, sir.
He couldn't have been more than 20, if that. His clothes were dirty, but seemed middle class to me, and he had a 3-striped tribal scar on each cheek. Here, Sunday. You'd better not be seen talking to me, though.
Oh, fuck them,
he said.
What can they do? Throw me in a prison cell?
He ate the cassava quickly, looking around like he expected someone to take it away from him, or to rush in and beat him. How long have you been here? I asked, when he had finished eating.
I come here 10 days ago. Maybe it's 11 now. Everyone here is new prisoner, waiting for processing.
This was news. Processing? To where?
To the maximum security unit. Somewhere in the country. Or maybe it will be worse. We don't know. Maybe we all go into a big ditch.
How long does it take? The processing. Whatever happens here. He looked at the floor and shrugged.
Maybe 10 days. Unless you have a gunje.
A gunje?
Dash. Money for the guards. Or maybe someone knows you're here?
I shook my head no on both counts.
Then you have big wahala, sir. Same as me. You don't exist. Shh. God is coming.
Chapter 43. When the guards woke me on the 3rd morning, they had to drag me to my feet. I wasn't going with them willingly, not to my own execution. My chest still ached from the beating the day before, and my nose felt seriously infected. This time it was a left turn out of the cell. I didn't know if that meant good news or that the bad news had just gotten a lot worse. I followed the human grasshopper down a steep stone staircase well, through another corridor and around several more turns that had me thinking I never would have gotten out of this place on my own. We finally came outside into an enclosed quad. It was just a wide expanse of sun-bleached earth, with a few tufts of weeds and a 10-foot-high fence topped with ribbons of barbed wire. If this was the exercise yard, it was a sad excuse for one. Anyway, I could barely see anything in the bright light, and it was hot, at least 100 degrees, give or take 10 or 20. The guard didn't stop until he got to the high razor-wire-topped gate on the far side. A locked door was opened to a passage through a building, through another door, then a gate, and to what looked like a parking area in the distance. I asked Grasshopper Man what was going on. He didn't answer. He just opened the door and let me through. He closed it behind me, locking me into yet another passageway.
It's been taken care of,
he said. What has?
You have.
He was already walking back the way we'd come, leaving me there. My heart sped up and my body tensed hard. This sure felt like an ending, one way or the other. Suddenly a door opened on my right. Another guard stuck his head out. He gestured at me impatiently.
Get in, get in!
When I hesitated, he reached out and pulled me by the arm.
Are you deaf or are you stupid? Get inside!
The room I entered was air-conditioned. It was like a shock to my skin, and I realized that all he'd wanted was to get the door closed again. I was standing in a plain office that seemed quite ordinary. In it were 2 wooden desks and several filing cabinets. A second guard, bent over some paperwork, ignored me. Also present was the first white man I'd seen since arriving at the airport. He was a civilian dressed in light trousers, a loose button-down shirt, and sunglasses. My guess was CIA. Flaherty? I asked, since he didn't bother to volunteer any information. He tossed me my empty wallet. Then finally he spoke. Jesus, you look like hell. Ready to get out of here? Chapter 44. I was way beyond ready to get out of this nightmarish prison, but I was also stupefied by everything that had happened to me since I had arrived in Lagos. What? How did you find me? asked Flaherty before we were even out of the air-conditioned office. "What's going on? What just happened back there?" "Not now." He walked over and opened a door and gestured for me to go out first. The two guards didn't even look up. One of them was scribbling in a file, and the other was jabbering on the phone when we left. Business as usual here in the bowels of hell. As soon as the door closed behind us, Flaherty took my arm. "You need some help?" "Jesus, Flaherty, thank you." "They break your nose?" "Feels that way." "Looks it too." "I know a guy. Here." He handed me a small bottle of water, and I started to empty it down my throat. "Go slow, fella." He steered me over to an old off-white Peugeot 405 parked under a shade tree nearby. My duffel was already in the back seat. "Thank you," I said again. Once we were moving, I asked him, "How did you do this?" "When you didn't show up on Thursday, I figured there were only a few possibilities. 100 got me your name. Another 500 got you out." He took a business card from his breast pocket and handed it to me. It was from Citibank, with an address in Lagos. On the back, in blue ballpoint, was written A. Cross, 9786 EY4. "You're going to want to change that passcode, and probably wire in another $1,000 or so if you can." What about my family? They came rushing into my mind all at once. "Have you spoken with them? Do they know what's happening?" "Listen, don't take this the wrong way, but I'm not your social worker. I know you probably feel like you've been through the 18th circle of hell or whatever, but you can't count on me for this kind of shit, okay? I don't mean to be harsh, but that's the way it is here these days. There's a lot going on right now." He tipped a Camel Light out of a pack, lit it, and blew twin streams of smoke through his nostrils. "You can call them from the hotel. Your family. I'm moved by your compassion." He grinned straight ahead. I guess we understood each other. Mine was obviously not the saddest or worst story Ian Flaherty had heard in Lagos. Probably not by a long shot. "You have any food in this car?" I asked him. He reached over and popped the glove compartment. There was a chocolate protein drink in a can. It was warm and a little gritty, and nothing had ever tasted better to me. I threw my head back, closed my eyes, and tried for the first time in 3 days to relax and maybe think in straight lines about the murder investigation and what had just happened to me. Chapter 45.